pans in salt pans in Brora, and we've worked together on and off over that period, and we've made quite a lot of digital reconstructions. I think that we're currently working as part of or within the Cine project, which is all about using digital means to preserve and to promote heritage, and is part of the Northern Periphery and Arctic programme, and involves partners across Europe, including Museum Nord and Skride Cluster in Iceland, Museum Nord in Norway. But in that project, we've worked on 3 reconstructions over the last few years of an Iron Age roundhouse, of Longhouse in Cayenne in the Strath of Kildonan, and of the herring processing in Helmsdale itself, and that's been a great process. I think really interesting to do it. And one of the things that has happened to us during this, of course, is that in the same way as it's happened pretty much to everybody else, is we've been hit by COVID-19, and one of the things that has made us do is to have to think about, how we can represent. We think about the curatorial field and how we can represent these things to people in ways that are, accessible and safe. And one of the things that we've done quite a lot of, Jacquie, that I've really enjoyed doing, is this sort of event, live broadcasts, reaching out to new audiences, whether it be through Zoom or Facebook or in other ways, and giving people a chance to explore the reconstructions whilst online. So that's been a great experience. But I think, Jacquie, you're going to talk about the whole archaeology aspect of it, which of course is very appropriate given the conference that we're at. And I'm really excited about hearing what you got to say on the subject.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, I mean, it's been great working with you guys, the whole Open Virtual Worlds team. And so it's really lovely to be here tonight. I'm usually at the conference in person. It was nice to see Kirsty and hear Ian and the team. So I just think you've done a great job getting the conference online for everybody to enjoy. Ian, could we have the first slide, please? So just a little bit of background for everybody listening. So I work for Timespan. I'm their digital curator and their heritage officer. So Timespan is an international cultural organisation in Helmsdale, a historic fishing village in the northeast coast of Sutherland, and you can see it marked on the map there. I'm sure many of you have visited Timespan previously. Can we have slide 2, please, Ian? We are a digital innovation leader in the Highlands Museum sector, and we've worked with Alan and the Open Virtual Worlds team, as we just said, for the past 8 years. Can we have the next slide, please? It's been a fascinating digital journey, and I, for one, have enjoyed every moment of it. And we've learned about the different uses of the immersive digital technology as a tool for reconstructing the past. And we have a lot of insights to share about the process of digitising archaeological sites and objects in Highland landscapes. And this is a great aerial view, just showing the variety of terrains you find in the Highlands. You can see the village of Helmsdale on the coast, the layout of the crofts heading up into the moorland and the river there. Can we have the next slide, please? So we at Timespan, we're in the exciting but also daunting process of redeveloping our museum. And this has taken a whole new different things to think about, considerations in light of thinking about the COVID and the response to it for our visitors and our communities. This will include making our digital exhibits safe and accessible. And as we just said, over the last 3 years, we've been developing immersive technologies and exhibits as interpretive tools for presenting and engaging in discussions around our themes at Timespan, which are really important to us. And these are climate change, land use and ownership, and Highland colonial history. And this is just our new Heritage Manifesto, which, as you're looking at it, is on the right-hand side. And with this digital transformation, those 3 spots that allows you to go into the virtual worlds that we've created. We will be talking about and going into the models in a short while. Can I have the next slide, please? So all this digital work that we've all been doing as a multidisciplinary team, as Alan has said, as part of the Cine project, see the past, imagine the future. I don't think it's become as more important as it is now. And Timespan, we're one of 9 international partners with St Andrews around the northern periphery who have been developing new immersive digital reconstruction tools. And Alan, if I can just bring you in at this point, and all the tools that we've been creating, you've created a kind of, I don't know, an archive, a repository for all these. Could you maybe say what that is, so if people want to find out more about what's being created in the Cinegate? Can you unmute first, please? And you're still on mute.
Yeah, I know, but I'm off now. Yeah, so thanks a lot for that question. So the idea behind Cinegate is to develop is to have a digital archive system, which makes it easy to input data, to link to data, and to associate it with, well, when I say data, I primarily mean media, and to associate it with metadata which describes it, and then enables you to work with that media, whether it be to create a trail app, to create a virtual reality exhibit or exhibition, or to share it onto social media or onto a web page. So very much the idea at the heart of it is the idea of taking heritage seriously, being able to work with movable heritage, to be able to work with sites, to be able to work with intangible heritage within the same system, and to be able then to use the media and the interpretation that is developed to be able to deploy it in different situations. So we don't put all our effort into making a website when we could also add an app onto that or add an exhibit onto that with very little effort. So it's kind of like built around the idea of immersion and reuse.
Could you maybe tell us what type of digital tools they'll find in the Cinegate? Obviously, we're going to be looking at 3D immersive models tonight, and also Catherine is going to be talking about the objects. So what can people see in Cinegate?
So one tool that we're developing is really aimed at museums, and we call it a local virtual museum. And so what it means is that when you deploy this on hardware that really doesn't cost so much, just £100 or £200, then people who come into your museum or onto your site are streamed digital content and are able to interact with 3D models and are able to explore 360 photospheres, or to see some of the beautiful aerial photography and aerial videos that we've seen before, but are able to engage with this digital material, but using their own devices, so that it's a good idea. We thought it was a good idea anyway before COVID, because it would mean that, instead of the museum or the heritage organization having to provide expensive displays, that the stuff would be accessible on people's phones, But in the kind of COVID world that we live in, or in the wake of COVID that we live in, you know, it removes the need for touching, you know, touch screens and all of that, and so is kind of COVID safe. And I think the other aspect is this stuff about 3D exploration. So to make digital reconstruction, to have a digital reconstruction, but to then be able to use that digital, to be able to explore that digital reconstruction in the first person, as though you were kind of playing a computer game, either using a headset or a shared space, or using being able to access media generated from that game in different ways on the web and on your mobile device, as well as playing the full game. So that's two. And I think the third is this idea of a museum without walls, of extending interpretation, so that we're very keen on being able to develop applications which enable you, when you're out in the field exploring a site, you're able to see a reconstruction of what that site would have been like in the past, and for that to be geolocated, so that the position that you're at and the orientation that you're at when you're looking through your goggles.
Oops. So I'm not sure what happened there. It looks like we've lost Alan, but I'm sure, oh, he's back again.
Okay, how much of me did you lose?
Just a few, well, just a few seconds.
Just a few seconds. So I was just saying that this enables us to be on site and to be able to both explore the site in its physical sense, and also to be able to explore the site from the perspective of the reconstruction of what it would have been like, you know, in the past. So you can see the longhouse as it would have been in Caen, or collection of longhouses, the village as it would have been in the past, at the same time as actually physically being there.
Thank you, Alan, for that. Could I have the next slide, please, Ian? Yes, so I'm just going to say a little bit about, you know, what we've been doing at Timespan with Alan and the team. So we've made 3 virtual world reconstructions, and these provide an overview of the landholding system in the parish of Kildonan in the past, at 3 major periods of change and societal disruption. So we've got Kildonan in the Iron Age. We have a pre-clearances farming township in 1813, and we've also got Helmsdale, the historic fishing village at the height of the herring boom in 1890. Now, all 3 sites selected for digitisation are located in our area that we've chosen within Kildonan. You can see the map, the Google Earth view in front of you, and this is our case study area. It's 5 miles square, extending inland from the coast and river estuary at Helmsdale. It goes up the river to heather-covered hills and peaty moorland. The population density on the coast can be traced back to a significant episode of depopulation of the interior at the time of the infamous Highland clearances. There is archaeological evidence for over 6,000 years of human activity, and agricultural settlement can be traced in the most remote locations. The exploitation of sea resources placed Helmsdale at one time as one of the most important export fisheries in Scotland. So within this case study area, there is so much for us to explore and compare. And in recent times, the political landscape here has changed, with community land ownership and collective community approaches to climate change, sustainability, and tackling global issues as well. So it's a fascinating area. Can I have the next slide, please? So that's our area of interest, it's Kildonan, and we've given you a little insight into why we've chosen it to look at all these issues, which is part of our museum redevelopment. But what are the advantages of bringing archaeological information and data together in a digital reconstruction, and who is it for, and how will it be used? Well, I'm sure some people looking in tonight will know that I worked at the Highland Council when the role I was doing then was called the SMR officer, which is the Sites and Monuments officer. So that shows you that was quite a long time ago. I can hear Kirsty chuckling away. And I know from experience that not all archaeological reports are written for the consumption of the general public. And that's fine, they weren't written for that purpose. But we know that more times than not that a lot of these fascinating reports with amazing amounts of information and evidence that's been gleaned from sites remain in repositories. They could be either physical or digital, and they're not that accessible. And it's also sometimes hard for the reader to visualise the archaeology being described or photographed, especially with my amorphous grassy or stony shapes on the ground, which I've been taking photographs of for at least 20 years, and somehow all my photographs look the same. And this is one of my better photographs that's on the screen at the moment, and I'm sure some of you will know that this is the remains of, it's a hut circle, the remains of a roundhouse. But even this, to a lot of people, they won't really be able to visualise what that was in the past. Can I have the next slide, please? So the digital reconstruction process makes, well, certainly from my perspective, and I'd be interested in terms of what Alan and Catherine have to say about this, it makes you think more about each part of the construction of an archaeological site, using the evidence from surveys and excavations, finds and objects, pollen and soil analysis, and LiDAR survey data. It makes you think not just about what has been left behind for us to see today in the landscape, but how the evidence actually fits together, or if indeed it does fit together, and how it can be interpreted. Some approaches have worked for us and some hasn't, and that's the way it goes, and it's all a bit of an experimentation. And there will be some parts of the reconstruction where there just is no evidence left. For example, like you can see on the screen here, like the roof of a roundhouse or in the landscape that has been excavated. And then in this case, we have to apply a theoretical or an experimental approach to filling in the gaps for these features. And we also have to look at available materials in the landscape. We look at weather conditions, how they've changed, and the laws of structural stability. And we digitally have to try the different versions and hopefully find one that works. But it's a fascinating process to be part of, as part of a team sharing this information together. The digital reconstruction is a great research tool for archaeologists to share information about site construction methods and discuss the different features by looking at it on a screen right in front of you. I've had many a happy hour arguing over the likely pitch or angle of a roundhouse roof, and I'm sure those discussions and arguments will continue for many a year yet. So I'd just like to stop there and maybe ask Alan and Catherine what they see as the digitization of archaeological sites and kind of the whole process and the benefits of it, and how what do you feel are the uses of this type of technology?
Well, I think you said it and hit it right on the head with being able to physically see it. You may not be able to fully grasp it when you see it, you know, just from the photograph or just from foundations and remains. But if you can actually walk in and understand, all of a sudden it brings a human element to it, realizing that this was a real place and people lived here. So I think, and you know, no matter what platform, no matter what medium that's presented in, because I can get that idea from a photograph, from a video, and then to a full like immersive VR gaming kind of experience walking through an environment. So I think it just brings that extra added layer in. And yes, there's still bits that you might have to guess, you know, an academic guess for things. But it's when we build, we came up with a term, it's an audit of knowledge, because you realize what's missing as opposed to what's there, because there's plenty of what's there. But then suddenly you're building, and I know our builder who does all the reconstruction, Sarah Kennedy, and you have really worked on, you know, being, we don't really know about this, i.e. roofs, you know, and taking the best stab at it. So I don't know, what do you think, Alan? You're muted. No, you're still muted. There you go.
With you and with what you and Jackie said, perhaps unsurprisingly, because we've talked about this, you know, ourselves, and so we kind of, so it would be interesting in the discussion here what other people say. But I mean, I would maybe add one thing, which is I think is, in a sense, is the most obvious thing, is that what this process is about. It's about taking the knowledge and the understanding that someone like Jacquie, or you know, a historian or another archaeologist have developed, professional understanding, often decades of research into a subject or into a site, and putting it into a form that means that somebody can walk up to it, you know, physically walk up to the exhibit, investigate it and so on, and not understand everything, but come to an understanding of it, you know, in a matter of minutes, to the extent that they can then engage in some level of conversation and some level of debate about it. I think that it makes it really accessible in that sense. And I think the second thing is that as has been said, it can also be a tool for, you know, investigation. That it's one thing to write a document, because if you're writing a document, you can kind of choose what you want to write about. Whereas if you're making a digital reconstruction, you have to make a reconstruction of the whole thing. You can, but you know, leave a part of it out. But in general, you have to make a reconstruction of the whole thing, and therefore it's a kind of test of knowledge. You have to kind of develop a sort of holistic approach, and that throws up all sorts of things. You know, what do you do when you don't really know? How do you indicate that what you're doing is a guess? And a tension between indicating the level of certainty that there is, and delivering an experience that can engage people and people can enjoy. So there's lots of issues that kind of get thrown up by that. And the one thing that I have learned through the whole digital reconstruction process is that you know, if you want to get archaeologists to disagree with each other, then you really need to start talking about roofs.
Yes, I've put the cat among the pigeons there. And I've just put this slide up on the screen just to show you exactly what we've been talking about. It's that toing and froing of myself as the archaeologist, the curator, sending information to the digital modeler, who we will talk a little bit about in a second, Sarah Kennedy, who made the models, and the rest of the team, Catherine, with the objects. But this just shows you some of the two-way conversation that we have to try and experiment and build up archaeological sites. So can we have the next slide, please, Ian? A research-based digital reconstruction of an archaeological landscape with vegetation and evidence of land use provides us with an opportunity to investigate changes in climate that may have dictated migration patterns and agricultural practices. If we explore the same landscape over time, we can compare land use methods and see how it has changed or adapted. And we can think about the impact and effects of these changes on past and present day societies. I can't emphasize enough how useful digital models are to stimulate discussion, whether you agree with what you see on the screen. Could I have the next slide, please? It's also useful for learning about the objects we find in the ground, which can be incomplete, out of context, and usually end up in a locked museum case. With digital technology, we can use the evidence from finds to recreate them, look at them in more detail to see faint marks and even traces of organic substances on the surface that the eye misses. And we can place them back in an identifiable human occupation setting to show how they were used or displayed. And this is something where we're going to hear a bit more from Catherine about this, but maybe Catherine, you'd like to say just as an introductory point on the process of digitising objects, but we've got some coming up as well very shortly.
Yep, I think that's fine. I think we can then move on to that because
Are you sure?
You got it. Yeah, you got it.
No worries. So just lastly, before we go into the models themselves, our three models that we've made represent places where people lived in the past, and they're important to our local community and they're a part of the rich heritage of the area. I've been involved in community-driven archaeology for some time, and it's been rewarding in many ways. The use of digital model reconstruction has helped us engage wider audiences with remote and inaccessible archaeological sites, and we can explore buildings as they might have been and understand the use of space when they were occupied. For some of our reconstructions, like the Clearances village, well, there are people with ancestors from the township of Caen in 1813. And this is a unique opportunity for local families to visit the homes of their ancestors and for virtual participants in terms of the curing yard at Helmsdale to see the herring gutting girls in action. There's so much you can do. The models themselves, as a research resource, can be added as references, I believe, to the HER records. And we're also writing up the digitisation of archaeological sites in Highland as a case study for the SCARF review, which will provide a background and introduction in using these useful tools. We approached the digitisation reconstruction process by developing a research framework for all aspects of reconstruction in a similar way that an archaeologist puts together a proposal before recording an archaeological site, posing the questions, gathering the evidence, and most importantly, and as well for digitisation, identifying the different team members that will be involved in the project. And what I like to think of this process as not just a mere spectacle, but the aim is to produce a reconstruction with the greatest possible detail, precision and scientific rigour. And if we can actually achieve something along that lines, we're not there yet, I don't think, but we're heading in that direction. That should always be our aim. So I think I'll leave a little background there. And I think, Alan and Ian, we could maybe move into the, in fact, just this little introduction to the first model, if that's okay. Could I have the next slide, please? To show you, this is, so our first digital reconstruction depicts a roundhouse agricultural settlement set in a hilly river valley with native woodlands, flora and fauna. The land today is covered in peaty heather moorland with hardly any trees and deer. And on the screen, you can actually see those yellow dots are the roundhouses that we have reconstructed within our area. Can I have the next slide, please, quickly? Sorry, can I have the next slide? Thank you. The archaeological remains date roughly, and they're very roughly, I'm not getting into the dating controversy, Iron Age, and we focused on an unexcavated domestic roundhouse and surrounding cultivation and field system. We surveyed the hut circle to give us a ground plan, which is the starting point for the digital reconstruction work. And we were the only people in midwinter out surveying a roundhouse hut circle, but I'm sure other people have done that as well. Can I have the next slide, please? We knew that there was another comparative roundhouse site nearby at Kilfedder, because you might well ask, why did we pick an unexcavated site? Because there'd be less evidence. The comparable roundhouse site at Kilfedder had been excavated by Horace Fairhurst in the 1960s, and we used the results from this excavation to inform us about the roundhouse reconstruction. We also referred to the Royal Commission's survey of Kildonan. Can we have the next slide, please? Carried out in the 1990s, which gives a really good information on land capability and categorises the types of roundhouse that you find in Kildonan. Our roundhouse was categorised as number 2, which was located on the slopes, but not on the best agricultural land and associated with field clearance. Of course, like many hut circle excavation, there was little evidence of the roof, but we did have a circle of inner posts in the Fairhurst report. We had several attempts at building it, and we obviously have come up with a theoretical experimental roof, and we hope it works. So I think maybe we're ready. That sets the background to the roundhouse reconstruction. We could maybe have a little tour of it, Ian, and we've got Alan and Catherine. After we've had a little tour, we'll have a talk about the objects. So, Alan, would you like to say a few words just to maybe, I would like to ask you, Alan, I was talking about the ground plan as a starting process. Could you maybe explain to our audience tonight, what is the process, the layered process to digitisation? We can supply you with the evidence, and we can package it in such a way you understand, but what do you do with it at your end? Can you unmute, please?
Of course I can unmute. Yes, thank you for reminding me to unmute. Well, I think it starts with the landscape and using survey data or OS data which describes the landscape, and to use that to define the contours and the shape. I mean, we use Unreal 4 to do the development within, and one of the great things about that is the scale and the level of detail that it is possible to achieve. So we can do tens of miles or hundreds of kilometers in size, and this is a new thing. I mean, we were working in this 5 or 10 years ago. We could only do buildings, really. We couldn't do landscapes on any scale, and I think that and then I suppose that we would look to have two-dimensional drawings, scale drawings of the layout of buildings and of the elevations of the elevation of buildings, and we would then import those or maps into this landscape and build upon them, and we would construct the architectural shape and size of the buildings and of the main features, and then, having done that, look at putting in features, looking at putting in details, and placing textures on top of the shapes, and then we can then paint in the flora and the fauna and import animals and add animations to them. And also, as you'll see, we're increasingly doing that with people to add people into the system. And then once we've done all of that, then we can look at adding game elements and interactions and interpretation. So there really is a set of different steps that we can go through. And we don't have to go through all of the steps for all of the reconstructions, but that's the sort of thing that we would, the sort of steps that we would go through. I'm using the word "we" here really loosely, because Sarah has done pretty much all of the reconstructions for us. Certainly, she's kind of been the leader in establishing this style and this level of reconstructions. And Ian Oliver, who has also been really important to this process in terms of developing the systems and doing the landscape things. And so Ian and Sarah have worked together very closely on the sort of modeling side and the technical side, and they've worked with you on the, you know, to give direction as to what what everything should look like.
Fantastic, Alan. Thank you. Ian, if you could just stop there for a minute. That's a perfect view. While you were speaking, Alan, we got into the entrance of the roundhouse. It was very exciting. I can just imagine everybody just wondering what it would look like. So, Catherine, we chose some objects from our museum collection. I'm going to show you something that you might recognise. Do you recognise this?
Hey, yeah, seen that before.
So, so this is a stone bowl from our collection, and obviously in the museums we just have these in our cases we put a little label in, and so you came with us with the proposal to digitize the objects. So just want to ask you, you know, what's the process of, how do you select something like this, and what's the process of digitization, and what's the outcome?
So I know that there's been multiple trips and multiple times over, you know, many years that things have been digitized, and then, you know, kind of slotted in and realized, hey, you know, with the reconstructions as well, and we're going to talk about the other reconstructions as well. But so I believe that object was actually laser scanned. So using a tabletop laser that then bounces a laser onto the object, it bounces back to the machine and it registers and starts to build this 3D model. We also, but more predominantly for objects that are funny shaped or have really nice detail, or let's say they're outside, out in the landscape, we use photogrammetry, which I'm sure you've heard of before, is the process of using photographs to then build the digital model. So there's lots, we've used a few different methods. So you take,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Ian, would you like, while Catherine's speaking, put the 3D bowl on view so Catherine can have that to speak to?
Yeah, there we go. So, and that just depends, you know, it depends on what we choose and what kind of, you know, technology and things that we have up with us as well. But photogrammetry works really well for a low-cost basic kit, because you can scale it up to a very expensive kit if you wanted to, but you could also just do it with your phone and a tripod and a clicker. You know, you don't have to do, or even that. And then use software, and there's different software available that's open source, that has educational licenses, that are professional level, you know, a whole range of things to then be able to build an object like this. And the importance for me, because this is really what I do and what I like, is being able to create this digital representation of the object, because no matter what, you'll have that, because like you said before, and I'm glad you mentioned it, is that a lot of times that things are collected, especially from archaeological digs, and they're studied, they're categorized, and then they're put into a collection, and then they're kind of, they may not be, it's what, you know, 1%, 2%, it depends on your collection, you know, versus what you have displayed. But we know it's a lot less that's displayed versus what's in the collection. And they all have stories to tell. So when you have a digital object, it doesn't take up space because it has multiple ways of being displayed. You know, it can be displayed once it's digitized, one, it's saved into a digital file. So as long as you have it placed somewhere, you know, you can do something with it, even in the future, even if you don't touch it for 10 years, there'll be some way to be able to use that file in some way. But then you could just have a photo of it, you can do a video of it spinning, you can have it onto some kind of program like we do here where you can actually manipulate it, put it onto Sketchfab, online platforms that hopefully will be around for a long time. But then what we've done as well is then take that step further and put it back into the original context. But it lets it live, and it can live by, you know, being put into the original context and being explored and interpreted by visitors and audiences. It can be used as research material because, you know, we've all been in, you know, definitely had that experience of like, oh, I really wish I want to see this object, but it's like, you know, halfway across the world. So, or they're not going to send it to you because, you know, liability and insurance. So it's like, but here I can send you this digital object of it, is representation of it, that it's as close as possible that we can get, because hopefully you've done it to a very high standard and high quality. And then it can be in multiple places at once. Then it doesn't, you know, then you can send it and can be used as research and teaching, and it has proven its life beyond sitting on the shelf in your collection. So, yeah.
Oh, that's great, Catherine. I mean, as I say, I've seen you at work, and the amount I've learned about objects from you, I certainly see them in a whole different light. And when you talked about putting it back into its a likely possible setting, then if we go back, Ian, I think on the bench there is a little stone lamp or bowl. Could we go into that a little bit closer, Ian?
I think that's the bowl.
We've actually put it back into the roundhouse, showing it as part of a occupied domestic setting in there. And when we talked about the Alan, when we talked about the animated characters, we've certainly brought the scene to life with adding this woman character, this Celtic or Iron Age woman, next to the weaving loom, because as well as the bowl, we also digitized some spindle whorls. So we thought we would show the process of where it came from, what would be happening, what were those spindle whorls, a kind of part of that textile process. Thank you very much. So I think what we might do, Ian, is just have a little look around and then maybe have a look up at this roof structure. Then all the questions will come in about roofs. And just so people, obviously, as we've said, you know, a proportion of this, a percentage, is theoretical, is filling in gaps. And that's where the discussions become really interesting as well. But then some of the evidence, like the floors that you see there, the hearths and structures, come from the evidence that we find in excavations. I've certainly used the information and data from the Scotland's Archaeological Research Framework, the SCARF resource, for certainly to identify land, tree and vegetation cover, and certainly looking at soil analysis for crop and peat cover as well. Interestingly, for those who are interested in how climates changed in the mid to late Iron Age, Fairhurst in his excavation noted that soon after the roundhouse had become unoccupied, because there wasn't really any other layers above the floor, he noticed that peat had begun to build up very quickly inside the floor of the building. And you can glean from that as you will, but certainly over time that peat had encroached onto the roundhouses at that level in the landscape. So I think we can come out again, Ian, and we could just have one other look around, and we might even just maybe, yeah, just come back outside, and then what we'll do is we'll just have an introduction. If you could maybe get our clearances longhouse settlement revved up for action, so to speak. And maybe we could just go to we'll just say farewell to the Iron Age just for now. Have a nice look at the hut circles over the hills at Cayenne there. And maybe I could have the next slide, please, Ian, while you get the next model ready. So the next model is a reconstruction of a pre-clearances farming township dated 1813. It's with the domestic longhouses and outbuildings, including a corn drying kiln and illicit whisky still. And it's got the traditional rig and furrow fields of crop set on the lower slopes of the same river valley at Cayenne. So the same area, but lower down the slope. It's one of over 80 small farming settlements in Kildonan, where the people were forced to relocate to the coast by the Sutherland landowners at the time of the Highland clearances. So the map on your left, if you look at the top middle, it says Cayenne Dian. Just across the river from there is our township. And the map on the right is a very close-up. It's an estate map showing, which is very great for us. It's actually showing the ground plans of the buildings, and it's pretty accurate. And the very long, in fact, the longhouse and the outbuilding on the far left are the ones we excavated. Can we go to the next slide, please, Ian? So the archaeological remains of most of these longhouses can be seen as we all know, I'm not going to be telling you what you see on the ground, you know more than anyone, low rectangular stone footings among the header and low boundary walls, kind of like the roundhouse. You know, in many cases, there's no building there for us to see. Could I have the next slide, please? So, as I've said, we excavated one of these roundhouses and outbuildings in 2013, and it was the year that we commemorated and the 200th anniversary of the clearances in Kildonan. So there's a big diaspora following for this. This helped us better understand the layout and division of rooms and what building materials were used. It also showed evidence for repair and adaptation, which really helps create an atmosphere of authenticity in the digital reconstruction, a feeling that it's been lived in, because nobody wants something that's a brand new building, because you know that was not the case. So I think if you're ready, Ian, we'll go into the clearances township, and here we are. So roundhouse settlement higher up the slope. We're coming further down here and still on the same side of the Cayenne Burn, and here we have the longhouses and we have the agriculture as well. And just on the agriculture here, just for those of you interested in some of the historical information that we used a range of written historical material, including Sir John Sinclair's agricultural report dated 1814. He was the man behind the statistical accounts, another great source of information. There was a lot written about land at the time of the improvements in the 19th century, when empire-building landowners were driven by more profitable approaches to land use, for example, sheep farming, as well as packing subtenants into plantation lots or crops along the coast. The writers of these accounts include references to former land use techniques. Although derogatory in tone and nature, it gives us an insight into the older methods of crop management, manuring, draining, and animal husbandry. By this time, the tree cover had become greatly reduced, and only birch scrub survived along the burns, and there was only the odd native tree by then. Could we maybe go into the longhouse, and we're going to come back to some more chats about object digitization. So once we go into the building, we get ourselves settled, and oh, we've come back out. We're going in. And here we're going into the front door of the building, the layout of the longhouse with the byre with the cattle at one end, as we can see here, and it's got the drain on the floor for all that slurry to gush out of the byre end. And then we've got the divisions here, and we've got that wonderful crup frame roof going down to the ground, those big timbers of the roof. And we've got a weaving area here, and then we're going to head up to the domestic end of the building. And when we get to this part, Catherine, we have a chair in this building, but I believe that chair didn't start its life out there. Where did that chair come from? And what did you do to it?
Well, originally, Jackie could tell more, but it's a bog chair, right?
Yes.
So yes, so funny shaped, but no, it's in the collection. And actually it is out, is it not? I think out on display. And I will.
And if I do that, I think you'll see it right there.
Oh, there's the bog chair. Sorry, I get emotional attachments to objects. No, but it's fabulous, and I know it's one of Jackie's favorite too, just because it has a lot of character and it's really unique. And kind of bringing it back to what I said before, it really brings a human element to it, because someone would have sat in it and it would have been well loved and well worn in. So yes, so it started in the collection, and we digitized that through photogrammetry, because that is an object. There are different things that kind of put objects into different categories for best digitization, and this fell into photogrammetry just because it is kind of a funky size. And that would be hard for a laser scanner to really get into all the nooks and crannies, but if you have photographs of it and you have enough coverage of all of your photographs of all the angles, so there was a lot of photographs in this one, then the software will be able to put it together and stitch it together into appropriate mesh and then build the object. Yeah, so, and then we've been able to then put that object back into the reconstruction, scale it appropriately to the right size. And, maybe it would have had something soft to sit on, because I wouldn't really want to sit on that. That's a little hard. But, that's up for debate and discussion, but that is also something that you can add as well. And that's something too that you mentioned before in your first one, that if you have something that's incomplete, if we have fragments, once it's digitized, it can be put together. If things need to be, if you want to make it a little, and making it clear that it's, hey, this wasn't found like this, and this is how the different pieces go together, or if you want to work on an object to make it look maybe how it was used and not as worn, you can do that digitally. You can put colors back on digitally if you think something was maybe painted or decorated, but it's putting an object that's quite celebrated and quite loved back into his context, and sometimes seeing that it was just a chair, or it was just a bowl, it was broken because it was used, and then tossed into the midden or whatever it was. So, and I think that's kind of fun. It's like maybe the highlighted object of the museum is actually something that was just tossed,
Oh, that's lovely. I think we both love this chair. I'm just going to check with Kirsty. I realise that we're at an hour at the moment. Kirsty, how can we go for another 5 minutes, or are we pushing our luck?
Absolutely. Take as long as you need. You're fine.
Oh, super. I thought, whew, it's not the usual where I used to get. So, that's brilliant. So, Ian, if we've got a few more minutes, what I'd like to do is if we could come out of the longhouse, and while we go to another building, could I just have the next slide on the screen? Because I'm just going to ask people what they think this is. So that's the mystery object. What do you think this is? And then Ian, can you take us to the building where that is? You'll know the building I'm talking about. in the, you can go back to the virtual world now. And maybe Alan, is there, oh, sorry, Ian, I think we're going to go back to the virtual world, Ian? Oh, but it takes a bit of time to go back. Okay, no worries, no worries. So we just want to go to the building where that object is. And Alan, as well in terms of digitizing the landscapes here, is it the same process as we did for the roundhouse? Oh,
You're muted, Ellen.
Yeah, some people don't learn, do they? You just do the same thing over and over again. I think that object was probably a part of a whiskey still.
Oh, Alan, well done, well done. So this, for both of you, this was great because we found that piece of copper in an outbuilding at Caen. It was identified as part of a still, and you guys have taken that information, and this is another thing you can do, Catherine, if you don't actually have the object, but only part of it.
Yep, is be able to then build the rest of the object around it, or at least identify that digitized part, like know what it is, and then be able to match with maybe, let's say, an asset that's available, that's already been created as a 3D model, but as a fictitious 3D model, but in the same, it's not the exact object, but it's a representation, a replica almost. But yeah, that you can then build upon it.
I think it's an interesting thing to be able to do the digitization process to show objects, you know, as they are now, and as Catherine talked about, putting them back into the state where into this kind of scenes where they would have been, and that contrasts quite strongly with the way in which objects are traditionally shown in museums. But I think also what is of interest, and something that we're playing around with or working with now, is that digitization process, how that can be combined with the modeling process to enable us to create accurate reconstructions of objects as they would have been when they were made or when they were kind of in their prime, because obviously, you know, some stuff that is 1,000 years old kind of looks 1,000 years old, and so it's interesting. And one of the things we've done that in a parallel project with Perth Museum is the St Maddow stone to kind of bring back the shape of the St Maddow stone and the colours that it might have had, and I think that's something that, yeah, so there's a range from doing the full modelling to doing the digitisation, and now increasingly you can kind of do the digitisation and then edit it to kind of take it back in time.
That's brilliant. Thank you, guys. So I think, Ian, we'll quickly go into our third model, but as you get that ready to go, could we just have the next, yeah, so just as an introduction to our third model. So our final model is a reconstruction of the planned fishing village of Helmsdale, which was built by the Sutherland landowners to support the development of the Scottish herring fishing industry along the east coast, and to provide employment for the displaced farming subtenants who were removed from Kildonan. The commercial infrastructure encouraged businesses and curers to the area, and it wasn't long until Helmsdale became one of the most important fishing centres on the east coast. Our reconstruction depicts Helmsdale kind of at the height of the herring boom in 1890. Could we have the next slide, please? We were very fortunate enough to have some great archival pictures of that time, 1890, with the herring girls gutting with the boats in the harbour, and even plans of the curing yards themselves that we could use in the digital reconstruction. Can we go to the next slide, please? And we also put back the demolished castle of Helmsdale. As you can see here, the castle has suffered, this was about the 1940s, from severe coastal erosion. Can we go to the next slide? And we had quite a lot of an earlier area of photograph and a ground plan to use again in the digitisation process. But what happened to this castle in 1970? Can we have the next slide, please? They knocked it down. So we were able to put the castle back together in our reconstruction, which brought a whole host of discussions, and everybody was delighted. Can we have the model, please, Ian? Thank you very much. So we're just going to take a tour. We'll maybe, if we can head up on to the other bank around the castle, and then we maybe come in over the castle into the harbour, and then our usual tour up Shore Street and into the curing yard, as it were. So we started the digitisation process by, again, I use the royal we. It's actually Catherine, the Royal Catherine Kennedy, who made this wonderful model, and she used and Ian, who they both made it together. So Ian, you took the OS data and laid the foundations of the contours of the landscape. But we used the OS maps to locate buildings and streets, giving us a blueprint at what the village looked like at this time. The OS data was imported into the virtual world software, and then we could start reconstructing the building up, literally feature by feature. Some of the old photographs were so detailed. We can slow it down just a bit, Ian, so we can actually get the details seen, because it's certainly worth it. So we could see the windows and the surrounds. We saw the roofing material, chimneys and stonework. And if you look at the buildings, you can actually see we could get quite a lot of detail. Helmsdale had these big arched carved doorways for the curing yards, which I've seen up at Pulteney Town as well. And we were able to put this lost feature back into the curing yard. Here we're actually walking along Shore Street. This was a row of curing yards where fish was taken from the boats into the working areas of the curing yards, and they were salted, they were gutted, salted and packed, and we'll come to one of those curing yards in a second. But in terms of the digitisation process, this is something maybe for Catherine and Alan to quickly just talk about, the putting the animated characters into the model. Maybe you could just tell us just quickly, I know we've only got a few minutes, but what's the process of actually getting these girls, these gutting girls, back into the curing yard? Alan will keep, Ian, if you just keep on going to the Timespan curing yard, maybe Alan, you could speak to us about the animated characters.
It took us quite a bit of effort, and Lucy Hardy was the person who really cracked it for us. Got the models in, and I think that you need a shape to make it look, like a person. But then you need to also have a skeleton so that you can articulate and move different bits. And then it's quite and then you can then move. Like a bit like stop animation, you just move the arm and move the positions and do those in a series, which can then be put together to give you the sort of motions that you're kind of looking at. So we do the animations. So there's the shape, there's the skeleton, there's the animations, and then we put them into the world. And then once they're in the world, we can also put them over pathways, and we can make them respond to events, so that you could end up having a conversation of some sort with in world characters and the like. So that's the main elements to putting a character in. But obviously it needs to embody research into what they would have looked like, and the motions that they would. And I know you're particularly fond of a particular motion here, Jacquie.
Yes, Ian, I was just going to say if you could go back round to the girls and maybe stop so we can all see the herring gutting girls doing the guttiad. I love, yeah, if you just come round a little bit, yeah, just stop there. So this was amazing. So one of the things about the models, the last time we made it, there was this feeling that we didn't put characters in it. So people were saying, what's happening in these yards? We don't know what's happening. So as soon as we put the characters in, people understood that this was the processing of fish. And it's this processing of gutting the herring. And amazing that, sorry, was it Lucy? Lucy?
Yeah, Lucy Hardy.
Yeah, Lucy, who actually took some footage of herring gutting girls. I believe it was online YouTube. I think it was Wick or somewhere like that. And she looked at it and she actually made that happen for these characters. I think it's probably the first time that you've got animated herring gutters in the world. So it was quite a feat. And as soon as we put the characters in, the whole thing came to life. And again, that thing about being able to discuss processes, what is about the East Coast fisheries, all these conversations about overfishing and climate change. We can have all these discussions in these models as well. And if we go up to the Cooper, because we do have a Cooper in just over here at the top of the building. It's maybe not absolutely correct to have all these people together, although the Coopers were in the curing yards as well. And here, I'd just like to show Catherine, here is another object. This is a Cooper's tool. It's called a Cooper's crozet. And it's here, but again, we've represented it in the model. Is this another one of the ones that was, I can't remember.
I think we did photogrammetry with that one because it's another slightly odd shaped one that sometimes you're just working, and I know I prefer photogrammetry, and so you see it and you just say, no, I'm just gonna use photogrammetry on that one because it's just too weird. It's too oddly shaped or something. So yes, that's photogrammetry, and glad to see it, that it's back in and maybe potentially how it would have been.
Yep, so, and just for folk wondering what that tool is, the crozet was a type of plane that was used for making grooves about 1.5 inches below the rim of a barrel to hold the lid or head in place. There were so many different planes used by these Coopers for every part of making the barrel. And here's Ian giving us a close-up. So all these objects are in our collection, but you're able to, we're interacting with all this archaeology and all these objects tonight. I think this is a great example of how it can be shared. And just to finish it off, Ian, if we can go back to the model, even if we've got 30 seconds, just to the left, we have barrels. So another thing that we did in terms of objects, I don't know if you can get it close up to the barrels. Can we get closer? Maybe not. So we actually had no barrels from Helmsdale with any, that's it, any stencils on them. If you go to the Wick Museum, all the barrel lids have from Wick, from Pulteney Town, best quality herring. But we had none from here, so Sarah made some. So we knew what the stencils looked like because we'd been up to the Wick Museum, and we said, let's have some for Helmsdale. So here we have proper Helmsdale, top quality, full mat herring caught at Helmsdale, and it's making me a bit peckish. But that's, I think, in terms of the archaeology, but I know we've kind of run over quite a bit, but guys, Catherine and Alan, is there anything else that you'd like to say, or have we kind of spoken ourselves out?
I think you've done a great presentation, Jackie, so that was fantastic. I'd be interested to hear any questions that there might be.
And I think just to say one thing is that with all these processes of digitization, whether it's a full reconstruction or it's the environment or if it's an object, I think it just opens up new avenues for discussion and for inquiry that you might not have realized before, whether it's, you know, the use of an object or where it came from, or, you know, flushing out a reconstruction and wondering, you know, what breed of cow did they have, or what tack on a horse, or what kind of, you know, it's that kind of just like little things too that you realize you need to answer in some form or fashion to be able to have a really layered, dense, full environment to explore.
Can I just be really cheeky as well and just say that, you know, just so people know, if anybody is interested in like talking about doing a project to do with digital heritage, digital reconstruction, then we'd be really happy to have that have that conversation. We've got lots of students who are looking for doing projects and also possibilities for getting funded work. So we would be interested in that. Although obviously our collaboration with Timespan we hope will continue to go from strength to strength.
And just a final word, because I've got to get one word in more than you. No, just a final word. If you want to view these models, please, we've shared the link in the chat. We've produced a wonderful Real Rights exhibition that explores all our themes. So if you go to our website and click on Real Rights, you can access all the models, plus a plethora of wonderful archive material as well. Certainly hope you enjoyed the insight. We've given you a whirlwind tour of all these sites. Kirsty, is there time for questions, or have we done ourselves out? I'm not sure.
I'm going to hand you over to Ian because he's your official chair for tonight. But I think we've got a lot of questions, so I'll pass you over to Ian just now and let's get them started.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, thank you, Jackie, Alan, Catherine, and Ian. That was really quite a fascinating journey through 3D animation and 3D reconstructions. I really love the 3D reconstruction of Helmsdale. It's really quite incredible the way that you're combining so many different sources of information to recreate a snapshot in time. Really great. I'm going to kick off with a question of my own. Is this sort of reconstruction work? Is this something that visitors are increasingly expecting? There's this kind of immersive experience, especially if they're visiting a museum. Is this the kind of thing that people are wanting?
I'll answer it quickly from a museum's point of view. Yes, we have certainly found over the last 5 years that more people are aware and have been made aware of immersive technology, and I suppose that's what we're kind of talking about here. And it's more that it's who's the driving force for what, because at a museum, what we really say is the digital technology is one of the interpretive tools. There are many interpretive tools. It doesn't replace an object, it doesn't replace a site, but what people do get from it is they are able to interact with sites and objects in a different spatial way, but they're also different. They're also, from museums' point of view, we want people to emotionally connect with sites and objects as well. And this allows, and people want the story, they want the narrative. And I think that digital technology has that great capability to do that with audiences. And I would say that initially, people that would come into Timespan maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago were very tentative about using digital technology, but it's certainly become much more mainstream, as you don't think so much about the digital technology, you think about the experience, or you think about what you're discussing. The message and the narrative is important, how people lived is important, and this is the vehicle to get you to that place. But yeah. Catherine and Alan will have vast experience of digital technology in museums.
No, well said. Well said.
Yeah, it was well said. And if I could just say that, I think that, you know, the digital is part of people's lives. really. You know, it's in every aspect of people's lives. And so therefore it should also be part of the museum's lives, because people kind of, part of their language, part of the way in which they communicate is through digital means, and therefore, you know, that's a space that, you know, the heritage, tourism, archaeology, museums can't afford to just, you know, step aside from or leave unfilled. And I think that we have had experience at where we've done these sorts of reconstructions or other sorts of digital projects. It has been reflected in increased numbers of people coming to museums. I mean, one of the things that it does do is it helps the museum be an intergenerational experience. It makes it easier for, you know, parents or grandparents to bring along their children and to have that sort of mixing of experience. But I think very much what Jacquie said about, you know, it's not about replacing the physical. It's not about an alternative to the physical. I think it's about mixing these two together. I think mixed reality, physical and virtual, physical and digital, is the way in which things should be in the future.
Yeah, I think especially as in the last 6 months, where, you know, we've all been stuck at home far more than we ever have been. I think people are becoming perhaps even more aware of the kind of resources that are out there, and actually the different kind of experiences you can have with these sorts of data sets and views, and being able to view objects and landscapes in a different way than they perhaps would have thought before. I think I've got a. I think the first question I think I saw was actually from Sadie, Jacquie. And it's one for you. She said, "Are you happy about the research to produce the forestry and crops? Are you happy with its faithfulness and its accuracy?"
Never totally happy with it, but that's a good thing. And as I said before, I think we are all. The team we have working Timespan St Andrews, it's all about process and rigor and research, and we've got to push the boundaries. This is what the experimentation is all about. And I would do that in any discipline that we were working in. So I don't think digital technology is any different. And I actually see great parallels with archaeological research to the digital guidelines for best practice as well. But in terms of vegetation and things like that, one thing I would say, I think it's as important to put as much research into what's around an archaeological site as it is into the building or site that's been reconstructed. So I spend a lot of time trying to access records on landscapes, vegetation, tree cover, changing climates, peat encroachment, pollen. And I must admit, it wasn't always very easy to do that. So I think in archaeology, we need to have better resources available to us. And I think with all Susan's hard work and her team with the HIARF review, I hope that will give us better resources to do this work. So archaeology, we need that data to be available, and digitisation needs to know what to do with it. But again, maybe Catherine and Alan and Ian can say something on that.
As it was Sadie who asked the question, you just say how brilliant Sadie's been over the piece. I mean, she kind of came into Timespan when we'd already started, but I think it's great the way she's embraced this this work, but also kind of made it her own as well. You know, with the real rights thing, and really shaped the stuff that we're doing. So that has been great. And the other thing I would say is that, you know, this digital work, it doesn't have to be something that is remote or tremendously difficult. I've been really impressed with what the Scottish Civic Forum have done with the Doors Open events. They've done loads of digital tours and done a digital open doors event, you know, up and down the country over the last month. And I think some of that stuff is really worth, you know, having a look at. And just the number of museums and organisations that have taken to social media, that have done kind of Zoom conferences that have done this sort of remote communication. As you say, Ian, with the situation that we've been in with COVID-19, it would be so easy for people to go, okay, you know, we're defeated. But actually, it's been really impressive what the whole heritage sector has responded to that, and has kept, you know, has used digital means to keep heritage as part of so many people's lives, which I think has been so important, apart from anything else, just in terms of trying to keep us all sane.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question from Susan at Arch, who I think Alan, you sort of partly answered this question in the chat, but I think it might be useful for others to hear what your answers be. She said, do your models show what is based on archaeological finds and what is conjecture? Should we be doing this? I was wondering whether you could maybe expand on the answer you gave, perhaps in the chat.
Yeah, I think that it's a difficult one, because there's a tension between providing an authentic reconstruction and providing a believable experience. So and obviously, you know, embedding the evidence in a way that it is, so that people can know what each aspect is and what the evidential base for it, I think is something that it is a kind of work in progress. It would be nice to be able to have the level of rigor that you would have in a research paper or in a report in digital reconstruction, and that would include being able to find what the evidence is for things. I think that there is progress and facility in that direction, but I think it's an ongoing thing, and it depends also in part what the purpose of the reconstruction is. You know, there's a kind of spectrum from sort of entertainment to authentic representation, and so I think that this is an area that is always going to cause some debate, but that we've made quite a lot of progress on in recent years.
And I think as well, what Alan is saying, the last 3 years has all been about research. I've always, in every meeting I've been in the Cine project, I've seen the models for research and experimentation. That to me is the driving force for this, or I see as a great benefit for this technology. As part of these models, our project finishes in a couple of months, so I'm actually writing up the references to these 3 models. So I see these models kind of like a digital book, and I'm going to put all the references to how we constructed it, you know, what information we used. But you're absolutely right. First of all, I think we need to have rigorous guidelines on this. And we also need, you know, we need digital material to be referenced. What was made? Where did that information come from? And if you have filled a gap in, tell us you filled a gap in. Don't just use a guess. You know, if you want to guess something, but tell us you've guessed it. But I think we can do a lot better than guessing. Experimental, theoretical approaches to filling in the gaps, but also using that huge amount of archaeological evidence that sometimes just doesn't get used.
Yeah, I think yeah, the sky's the limit, really, isn't it? I mean, let's be honest.
You got to have some level of control, you know.
Yes, but I think your point about actually you sort of almost need a provenance for the digital objects that you're creating, the metadata behind them. You need to be creating that as well. It's so people can know what's real and what isn't, to put it in very simple terms.
Absolutely. And when I first started this work, it was only the guys at St Andrew I was seeing this being done with, and certainly that's the way that we employed onto this project. But I couldn't really find this anywhere else. So, you know, that is a big area where community archaeology can have a great input.
Yes. There's a question from Margaret about the chair, which seems to have struck a chord. I remember seeing it, thinking, yes, that wouldn't be a chair that I'd like to sit on either, actually. But she said, is there any evidence for a woven or a grass seat on the chair?
Not Margaret, not that I know of. And funnily enough, that chair, it's pretty fragile now, and it's missing two spars on the seat. So that's why if you sat on it, I think you might fall through it. So it's actually but also it's called a Sutherland chair. So it's a provincial vernacular Sutherland chair made by just the, possibly with a bit of bog wood, local house carpenter. And you don't sit on these chairs with your feet down. You got to sit with your legs straight out, because this chair is about 30 centimeters off the ground. So you can't bend your feet. They were not meant for that. So they were literally meant to be beneath the peat smoke, and just as, while you were doing something at the fire or telling a story, I don't know. But yeah, I've seen quite a few examples of the chairs. They may very well have had little blankets or things put across them, but I've never seen any. I don't know.
I'm conscious of the time, but I think there's just a question that I was just wondering if you're creating an immersive sort of 3D environment within a museum, for example, if you're giving your visitors headsets or whatever to move around in these sort of environments, do you think that you'll be combining sounds and smells as well to create a more overall all-round experience?
Well, I'm going to quickly say something. I know Alan and Catherine. Well, absolutely. I feel that with any, I think sounds, and in fact, we've shared links on the chat feed of the 3 models, and they have got narratives. So if you want to look at the models again in your own time and actually listen to a narrative in it, then yes. But one of the things we haven't quite done yet, which we are going to install them in our museum as part of our museum redevelopment, and we're going to be adding sounds like the cooper banging at the barrels and the girls when they're chatting in the curing yard. So all those things, Ian and Catherine, this will add to bringing everything alive, I think. And have you, Catherine and Alan, have you done this with some of your other models, I believe?
Yeah. I think, and go ahead, Alan. Do you want to talk?
Sure. I mean, yeah, you can go. Yeah, I think so. I think sound is just so important in terms of creating and building an atmosphere. I mean, in St Kilda, we did model of St Kilda, and we were really challenged about how to model literally millions of birds flying around in the sky, and it wasn't something that our systems could stand. But what we could do was create the sounds that these birds would have been making, and in that way create the right atmosphere in the space. So I think background sounds in terms of narrative, communicating culture through poetry or intangible heritage through poetry and music. I think all of that is, really important. Smells, I am a little bit more skeptical about smells, because I'm not sure what the past would have smelt like to the people who were in it, because smell is kind of a destructive sense. And so if the place stinks, if you're in it 24 hours a day, you stop smelling it. You really don't notice it, anymore. And so it's this change in smell, which is what really hits
thousands
people.
of herring you would still smell.
Do you think? Okay, well,
I don't know.
I mean, but yeah. So smell as well. I suppose we can do that with scratch pads and so on. But I think that sound is just so important. And obviously, in a museum, there's issues to do with sounds for individuals and kind of collective space sounds, and you have to think about the staff as well, because they're going to be there for long periods of times, and so you need to worry about repetitive sounds, which might be good for a visitor, but there's lots of issues there, and I think it's something that is too often overlooked when working in the digital domain. The sound, the different ways in which we can use and work with sound.
The reason why I asked the question is that I remember going to the Jorvik sort of on the little sort of cars that took you around the Jorvik excavations, or the results and the reconstructions, and the smells and the sounds that you heard down there. And I was just thinking, but perhaps yes, the smells. If you're working in that environment all the time, I think it perhaps could get a little bit overpowering. I think that's probably come to the end of the questions. So unless there's anyone else wants to put their hand up as for a last minute question, or anything in the chat, that's probably it. So no. Okay, in which case I should like to thank Jacquie, Catherine, Alan and Ian again for a fascinating talk. And a big thank you to everyone who's joined us this evening. And sorry, I'll let you speak as well. But we'll hopefully see you all again tomorrow, when we'll be listening to if I can find John McLeod. It's a student triple bill tomorrow, with students from UHI, with the archaeology of whiskey smuggling, and 2 talks on paleoecology. So hope to see you all then. So thank you for tonight, and hopefully see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Very welcome. Thank you.